Est-ce qu'on commence doucement? OK. So, bonjour. Merci de vous être joints à nous pour cette conversation. Thank you so much for being here for this conversation with Sonia. Sonia's been working on this residency for a few months now, and we're really excited to hear about it. Mais avant de commencer, j'aimerais prendre quelques minutes pour reconnaître le territoire sur lequel la GNO est située. La Galerie du Nouvel-Ontario is grateful for the space it occupies on the ancestral land of the Atikameksheng Anishinaabeg. The city of Greater Sudbury, built on land otherwise known as Neswakamak, which means where the three roads meet, also includes the traditional lands of the Wanapete First Nation. As an arts organization founded by a community whose ancestors descended from colonizing people, it is important for us to stress that the activities of the GNO predominantly take place on the land included in the Robinson-Huron Treaty. Also, Tio, I might have a bit of difficulty here, Tio Kiaki, which is now otherwise known as Montreal, is situated on the traditional territory of the Kenyan Kihaka, unceded indigenous land. The Kenyan Kihaka Nation is recognized as the keeper of the land and waters on which the artist is speaking from today. This land has long before our arrival served as a place of gathering among many different First Nation people, including the Kenyan Kihaka of the Odonosini Confederacy, Huron-Wendat, Abenaki, and Anishinaabeg. Ben là, je vais céder la parole à Laura. Laura will be presenting the artists and animating the event tonight. Et merci à Dunstan aussi. Thanks, Dunstan, our new arrival on l'équipe de la GNO. Alors, cette fois, Laura.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Merci. So my name is Laura. I'll be chatting with Sonia today, finding out about her residency, and hopefully have some good questions for them as well. A couple of housekeeping notes before we start. While we're just chatting, it would be great if everybody could keep their microphones closed during the conversation. The event, as you probably already have noticed, is recorded. So if you do not wish to have your face appear on the recording, we would just ask you to turn your cameras off. There will be a portion at the end where you'll have a chance to chat with Sonia or ask some questions about their practice and about their work, but please just hold your questions for the end. Et pour ceux qui veulent poser leurs questions en français, sentez-vous à l'aise de le faire. On peut traduire pour vous pour poser les questions à Sonia. So to introduce Sonia, our guest of honor today. So Sonia Ekiyor-Katimi is a non-binary Nigerian self-taught visual artist and architectural designer living in Canada. They recently completed their master's in architecture and are now exploring their personal art practice. They take an interest in queer identity through community arts, participating in intersectional panels and multidisciplinary collaborations, such as the Up Here Festival, Nuit Blanche, both in Sudbury and Montreal, and Black Lives Matter Sudbury panels, as well as group installations for upcoming festivals. Welcome, Sonia.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. I just want to start by saying thank you to the GNO. Thank you, Laura, for being so patient with me. This is my first residency and I work really slowly and I'm still figuring out how I make art. So thank you so much for your patience with me. And thank you, Dunstan. Thank you, Danielle. And thank you to the people that I interviewed. Thank you for letting me share your story. The interviews will go up online later and I'll post that on my pages. So thank you. And thanks for everybody tuning in. Even though I'm really nervous.
It's okay. I think these things kind of always go like this. And if we're honest that we're nervous, I think it'll just, it just makes it easier already. Yeah. So when we first talked, you kind of sent me a title for your residency, which you settled on a title that's called Tenderly Coded. And so that kind of becomes the title for your residency, for the projects that the works that you've made, this body of work that you've made during your residency. I'm wondering if you can maybe just start by telling us more about, the meaning of that title for you and how it relates to the body of work that you've been working on for these past few months.
Okay, yeah. So Tenderly Coded kind of refers to the magnetism and lexicon that is created by queer people. Now we have Wi-Fi, internet, and all this, and we can find people directly that are queer and talk in private. But beforehand, I was curious about how did people find each other, because I knew they did. So in countries where it's illegal and in places where you're not allowed to gather as queer people, how did we still end up finding other queer people? So Tenderly Coded is kind of my investigation into the ways in which people recognize queerness in others without, projecting, but recognizing queerness in others and finding each other even though we're not supposed to. Yep.
Nice. And then so maybe could you talk a little bit about, what the scope of the project you had was, like what your initial intention? You mentioned interviews earlier, but some people might not be aware of what kind of your project was about.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So
yeah, go for it.
Basically, at first I was just like, I wanted to ask other people, how do you recognize queerness in others, and you don't want to project and say it's just because they're dressed this way or they talk this way or they walk a certain way, but that could also be part of it. So I just wanted to ask as many people as I could. So because I come from Nigeria and it's our Independence Day today, actually, which, there's really nothing to celebrate because we are still criminalized as queer people in my country. And there just isn't a place for those kind of conversations or identities. So it occurred to me that it would actually be more interesting to find out how people in those kind of places find each other and talk to each other. And so I took an interest in people that are here in Montreal, but they came here knowing they were queer and knowing that they would be able to explore their identity a little bit better than if they were back home. And I wanted to ask them what the difference is and how their expression has now become. So yeah, I kind of put a call out. I didn't know really what I was looking for specifically, but I put a call out and I got a lot of participants at the very beginning, maybe 15, but slowly people started like, they got nervous and they didn't want to be shown in this conversation, which is completely understandable because it could still be dangerous. It could still hurt their family life. It could still hurt their friends that don't know. So a lot of people, wanted to, but took it back, and I completely understand that. So I settled with 3 people, which was a lot more manageable in the end because it was easy to get into things a lot better.
Yeah, so then based on those 3 interviews, so that the I guess from what I understand of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal was to sit down with these people and have one-on-one kind of conversations with them, interview them, and also like provide a space for each person, so that they can open up about their queerness in a self-affirming way. And then based on those interviews, you would make, portraits of these individuals, right?
Exactly, yeah. I didn't even talk about the portraits, but yeah, I tried to find a way to, it was important to me to meet in person as well, because I want to see what kind of mannerisms I'm missing from that. Again, the tenderly coded, how are we listening in person and how are we communicating in person about these conversations. So I decided to ask them where they would feel comfortable meeting. So I had 3 different locations in the end, and I asked them to dress how they would normally like feel well expressed or feel more like themselves, so that it would just be comfortable and I would be meeting them on their own terms.
Mm-hmm. And then, like, I guess, can you tell us more about what transpired from these interviews, or like, is there anything that changed along the way a little bit?
Yeah, it went really deep. The first interview was with Qatar and Avery, and they were really lovely. I met them at their place. We were supposed to meet somewhere else, but you know, it was a rainy day, so I met them at their place. They made me a huge pasta dinner. We had some wine and we were just talking like friends while I recorded. And I wanted to know, it was really interesting for me to have like the first conversation be with a couple, because that's the other thing is if you're growing up in a certain kind of country, you're not seeing any kind of representation of what like a romantic relationship would look like until you come over here and then you see a little bit more. And so it was interesting for me to see that, you know, this is somebody who's loved and discovered love when they came out of the country. So yeah, in that first interview, we hung out for about 6 hours just talking.
Wow.
Yeah, so it got really deep and it was very hard for me to cut down the interview because I didn't really want to leave anything out, but I think I got the general idea. And the second interview was with Gaia, who was actually from the same country as Qatar, Morocco. And but they're trans, so I was looking at those two different identities from one country. And yeah, we went on a little hike, so we were out in nature talking, and you know, I was able to take some reference photos out there in nature. And honestly, everybody there was younger than me, but the way that they spoke was just like I had to confront my own kind of like unwillingness to answer those questions myself. And then the last one was with an old friend of mine, actually not old, but a friend that I've known for about 3 years now, Princess, who we became friends online. Actually, everybody I met online, these are all people that I know very well. So not very well, but I already knew them online before we had these conversations. So I think that made the interviews a little bit easier. But Princess and I, it was hard to conduct a formal interview because I'm just like, I know a lot about her, but then some of these questions, I was just like, oh, I didn't even think to ask that, you know, I didn't think to interrogate that of my friend because we were just doing our own thing. So it was kind of a way to, it took our friendship to a different level, I think, because now I had to ask them something kind of maybe traumatic, and we had to share that with each other. At the end of the interview, I noticed that all the interviews had a lot in common, even though we were all from different places. I mean, we're all from Africa, but we came here at different stages in our life. And Princess is actually second generation, but she lived in Cameroon when she was younger as well. And it was just nice to see that we had that same magnetism and same questions that we had as children that we were now exploring as adults. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to when you say, you know, your friendship became much deeper, because I feel like, you know, their experiences sort of like mimic or kind of map onto yours as well, right? So like it wasn't just you interviewing them, it was them interviewing you as well.
Myself. Yeah. But
yeah,
it was really emotional to try to edit the interviews because I had to go back, listen to everything again, get emotional, stop, pause, work on the painting. I'm staring at their face, I'm thinking about all this, and I just felt like completely overwhelmed, which is why I think I wouldn't have been able to handle more than 3 interviews at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it something that you kind of intend on continuing, like making more, you know, for the residency, you made 3 of them, or you made 3 of them, but it's a project.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an ongoing process, but I will take it a lot slower because it really messed up my mental health to consume all of that at once. But I do want to keep asking myself those questions. And actually throughout the interviews, I kind of morphed the questions a little bit to suit the person, because we were kind of having just a casual conversation. at the beginning, so I would know what questions to cut out, then what questions to introduce for a couple versus somebody who's on their own in this interview.
Yeah.
And I think it'll just evolve that way. The more I get to know people. And I still have a list of people that I have to interview, a couple from Lebanon that I'm supposed to be interviewing next month. And I think I'm just going to keep going with it and painting those portraits, because I never saw anything like that when I was growing up, or I wasn't allowed to see any of that kind of representation where somebody is visibly queer or visibly in a queer relationship, or, you know, extra expressive or not white. So it was just an honor to be able to represent these kind of stories and this kind of subject matter.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I have a question, I guess, about intimacy, because I feel like you've already explained it a bit, but I do feel like intimacy is a huge part of what drove this project for you. And, you know, there's all kinds of intimacy at play. There's an intimacy between you and your, you know, the subjects that you're interviewing, especially because you're discussing personal matters. There's intimacy between the models. Sometimes, as you mentioned, when they're in a romantic couple, you can, you know, visibly see in the images that you're drawing the intimacy between these characters. And then also an intimacy, I guess, in the way that you're treating these people's images, right? Like there's a lot of love and care in painting someone's portrait. It's a very intimate gesture. So I was curious to see if you've discovered new forms of intimacy during this process, or maybe that's a tough question, but yeah, I'm curious.
It's actually really simple, because I feel that every interview spoke about it without me having to I didn't know how to word it. So they basically did the work for me and gave me this information. I remember during Princess's interview, I asked her, like, how do you express care for somebody who isn't your family, but have become your family, or you want to become friends with? And I noticed the difference now is that we listen in a different way. So that's what she had mentioned, is that we had to learn to listen in a different way. And I know that for me, growing up, my family isn't very lovey-dovey. I don't know if that applies to family, but they aren't very expressive when it comes to love. They won't say I love you. I never heard any of that. We're not very affectionate. We don't hug or anything like that. But the minute I started forming a community here, I was all over it. I was saying I love you to all my friends. You know, we're all kissy, and it made me think, like, where was this whole time, and why was I so ashamed and afraid of showing intimacy or sharing that with someone? But I think once you step out of the box, it's so much easier for you to just say, I don't care, like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, I need to show my people love. So Princess was explaining to me that we as a queer community are very invested in creating safe spaces. And I know there's a lot of talk of like, the world isn't safe, and like, you're a snowflake, and great, we're snowflakes, but wouldn't it be just great to learn something so specific about someone and know how to create an environment for them that makes them feel completely safe and loved? And what could possibly be wrong with that, you know? So
Right.
That was kind of what Princess taught me, is that we just have to listen in a different way. We learn the things that people don't want to hear or don't want to be around. We know the kind of places that we avoid. So we've kind of, again, going back to the tenderly coded, learning this language for ourselves, or having more specific relationships with people, because you know, we lacked that growing up. So we're basically creating our community from scratch and figuring it out as we go along. So there's really no rules. Yeah. So that's the main intimacy. And then between the couple, I really loved observing. I love observing couples because, again, no representation of this, but they said a lot of things at the same time, which I know happens with couples, but it's this way that they will turn and look at each other and say the exact same thing. And I'm just like, there's this layer of magic to it. And that magnetism as well. When I asked the question, how do you know just by looking at someone or just before you even speak to someone, how do you know or assume that they're queer? And Qatar had said, there is like a different eye contact that you have with someone who's queer. Avery was talking about the way that people walk and how lesbians could actually be their own kind of gender, because once you step away from what femininity originally means, you realize that it involves what cisgender males are viewing you as. So once you step out of that definition of womanhood, then you become a whole new gender because you don't care about those rules. But then you also find that heterosexual and cisgender women don't really, they have to do a lot of upkeep to try to live up to what it means to be a woman anyway. So it's just like, we're all doing this performance. And once you break free from that, you start to notice the people that are like, oh, I don't care about my category anymore. And maybe they're not always queer, but most likely that's what brought them to that point. Or they take up a little bit more space, or they dress a little bit more extra and they're just a bit more expressive with their fashion. So you look at that person and you think maybe they're queer because they don't care anymore about following that structure. And Gaia was also talking about how, you know, you can kind of see the cage around people. Once you step out of that, you can see the gender cage around people when they're actually trying to keep up with what it means to be any kind of gender. And
in patriarchy,
yeah,
to conform to patriarchy,
exactly. So you start to notice just little things, and maybe you don't even know what you're noticing, but it just, something doesn't fit right, you know, something is stepping out of line, and that's kind of where you notice the queerness in people, and it makes it easier for you to be comfortable around those people. Even if they're straight, even if they're cisgender, you would be gravitating towards those people because you can notice that they stepped out of that. Everyone I interviewed, including Qatar and Avery separately, we all found out that our childhood best friends were also queer. So it's like, did it start when we were children? And were we attracting this when we were children? Like, we were doing something different, but what is it? So there's like this magic component that we still don't have a word for. And that's really fascinating to me. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I guess, like, because we've been talking about your interviewers, your interviewees so much, maybe we can, you know, show the portraits that you've done, because I feel like it'd be nice to see those. Let me just see how, there you go.
Okay, yeah, so this is the first one. This was the first interview with Qatar and Avery. Avery is the one with the tattoos. Qatar is in the front with the black shirt and the white inner shirt. And yeah, this look, I wanted to capture this look that they always shared between each other. As the night went on, it increased because we were drinking wine. But they were just getting closer and closer. And you'd see that even as they're moving around or adjusting their bodies, it's the other person will respond accordingly, and they just fit again. But I don't think they notice that they're doing that. And when they turn around to look at each other before answering a question and just laughing, and it was just like that special moment to me. So while they were talking, I took this picture. I had like a bunch of other references that were just very straightforward and posed, but this was a moment where they were like, what do we do next? And they looked at each other and I was like, perfect. So I captured that moment. And this was in their home. So I wanted to keep a little bit of the like texture of their home. So behind Avery, you can see that pillow, because I saw that pillow move around a bunch in the night. So I was just like focused on it. So I left that there. Yeah, and I used a collage for all the portraits because there's some components that I just didn't want to recreate and mess it up. Like the clothing they wore specific to them. And I just wanted to keep that component in. The
just
next number two.
Can you give us an idea of the scale of these, just so that?
Yeah, these are 18 by 24 inches. So they're like pretty large, but not too large. I had to really stare at them all for like a week each, just staring at the details. Or, you know, I'm not really used to doing something that is this level of realistic, even though it's still kind of cartoonish, that's my style. I'm not used to doing something this realistic. So that was a new experience for me. And I'm glad I got to capture the like smile lines and the way they were looking at each other like that. And even the hands touching, it was kind of like this all night, or they would swap positions and that other hand would go there and the shoulder. So I just wanted to represent that.
Do you want to do the next one?
Yeah. Okay, so this is Gaia. We went out to, I forgot what park it was, but we went for a little hike, and Gaia had explained to me that they had been dancing in this place. This was the first place that they like expressed themselves through dance when they came to Montreal. And that was really special. So I got to walk around there for the first time. And why I put the orange in their hand is because, well, we were eating them, but they were telling me about, oh, so I actually did ask everybody, is there something that you lovingly miss about your country? Because I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying these countries are horrible places. Like there's so much love there. It's just, there's a limit to, there's a condition for receiving that love. So Gaia was explaining to me that there is a common practice of, or gesture of asking to peel something for someone else, like peeling an orange or peeling a boiled egg for someone. And when I asked them what they missed about their country the most, they were saying, I miss people peeling oranges for me, which is just the sweetest thing ever. So I wanted to represent that because they brought me all these little, they brought me drinks and all this. Like I got gifts for interviewing them for their story of just, it's so thoughtful and it's so queer. So yeah, I put the orange in the hand and wanted to represent the background, which was their safe space and this place that they felt confident. And this is my friend Princess. So she's known around for her big pink afro. I think people recognize her instantly as this afro, and her wacky sense of fashion. She honestly just does anything she wants. What was really interesting is I already knew this, but during the interview, I had asked her like, do you feel any kind of shame around sexuality and sex in general? And she was the only person that just said no, and she wouldn't elaborate. She was just like, no, I don't have any shame. And I was just laughing, but that's her, that's how she is. So I like this idea of how she like is kind of sitting upright and she's in her big boss suit, you know, and this was actually in my living room. Well, she got me this apartment because I wasn't able to come to Montreal due to the pandemic. So she was able to like come in and look at it for me, and that's the level of trust we had with each other. So it was really amazing to paint her in my own space because I felt like, you know, we kind of share this space and my home is her home. So I've painted her before, so this wasn't really brand new for me. And hers, I think, took the shortest amount of time because I already know the features of her face very well. At first I thought that I would raise the afro up and uncover her eye, but I already know what her face looks like, and I like that fro taking over her and the little smirk because she is that confident. And yeah.
Have you shown these portraits to the people? Not yet.
No, I've been painting it, but I would put it on my close friend's story so she wouldn't see it, and I took her off my story, so she has no idea. But I was just waiting also to get a better scan of it. So yeah, but no, I like the clothes she chose to wear as well. This is very her. Like this is, if she wasn't wearing these and I saw them on a hanger, I would know they were hers. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those. Let me just see what time it is. Maybe we have time for a bit more. Yeah, and I guess like, so you're kind of like discussing, you know, all of these wonderful these wonderful conversations you've had, and the kind of pleasure that you've taken from communicating with these people. You've kind of already shared some highlights and some insights. I'm curious to see if there were any challenges that you've encountered during these interviews, or during the whole process of the residency as well, I guess. Yeah.
So, it's hard for me to think about, well, I don't think of myself as a very naturally creative person. Like, I have to put in so much effort to be able to relax and actually make something. So my fear was that I would create these really manicured portraits and it wouldn't show the energy or essence I was getting from those people. I like the way it turned out, but I still feel that they were very too clean cut, maybe. And the challenge was mainly those questions and like thinking about it myself. Personally, I still have some beef with the government that I have to work out my own place in this country so I don't have to return back home. But yeah, it just made me face my own situation a little bit more. I'm still coming from a huge place of privilege. Like, I'm already here, I'm living here, but I know there's people in Nigeria who have no way of getting out and have no way of really living their life. And even when I was speaking with Gaia, they told me, I know that I couldn't stay in Morocco or I would never become my true self, and how there is this like narrative for trans non-binary people that you're trapped in your body, but is it really that, or is it that my body is in the wrong place and my vessel isn't interacting with this world because it wasn't created for me? So I had to kind of, I went most of my life ignoring the body that I was in because I was just like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't really want to think about it. Now I love my body, but yeah, back then I would just flat out ignore it. I didn't want to think about it. I also didn't want to think about my childhood and think about my first few experiences. But through the project, I actually had, when I pushed through the discomfort, I actually had this like, I don't know the right word, but there's kind of a piece that comes with knowing that all the experiences I had when I was younger, knowing I was queer, but maybe not knowing exactly that language for it, but knowing I was queer and experiencing this with other people who also aren't out, but there was a secret language. I realized it's always been there. So yeah, it was very uncomfortable, but I had to confront that. I also thought that I let go of all my shame around sexuality and sex, but once I started talking to them and they would bring up something that I was like, oh, I forgot about that. Oh, I didn't want to think about that. Or I just pretended that I wasn't feeling that and now I've forgotten about it. So it was kind of reminding me of, yeah, all those bad feelings I've always had. But it also helped me release those feelings. I would also say that, yeah, the painting of the portrait, it's like medium wise, I am very scattered in my thinking. I feel like I have to choose one thing and stick to it, but this was the first time that I was able to just say, whatever, I'm gonna do a collage, I'm gonna do it this size, and it just doesn't really matter. So I'm happy that I pushed through the discomfort of using multiple materials and made like these mixed media pieces. And then I'm getting more familiar with the technical side of art, which like editing the photos and laying things out, and also doing a little bit more writing. Yeah, so that was, it was challenging, but I'm happy it happened, and I think it had to happen. So
yeah. And I guess like from a perspective too, like you were saying, from a technical standpoint, you describe yourself as a self-taught artist. And so this is kind of, part of your development as like, trying different mediums, trying different approaches to your work. We were talking recently about art and academia, more specifically about the pressure that, radical artists or people treating certain subjects in their work sometimes seek to legitimize their work or to seek validation from institutions by going, through the academic route, getting a degree, getting an MFA, getting a PhD, whatever.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, because I just went through architecture school, which I'm sure a lot of people here can tell you, there's a lot of critique that comes with creating work. So I'm always thinking from the standpoint of someone will be viewing this and judging this. And I mean, I think architecture is close enough in art where the person who is critiquing your work might not realize their implicit bias against your work. So I realized a few years ago that I wasn't comfortable with white people viewing my work and then being the ones to critique it, because how could you possibly know what you're critiquing? Because we haven't been part of this institution, and this rubric of judgment is not inclusive of people that aren't white or from the northern climate. So I'm just wondering, like, how can you have a full enough understanding to critique my work? So that helped me release my self-judgment, or, you know, viewing myself through that lens as well, because I was just like, they just don't have the substantial like history and understanding to be able to critique my work. And also we're playing catch up. Like, I don't really want to be part of that institution because, again, it wasn't made for me. And so luckily I'm already outside of the box and I can do anything I want. But yeah, it still comes back where I'm like, is this legitimate? Like, am I supposed to be creating art in this way? And is this professional? And even with the size of the paintings, I always think like, well, when I go to a gallery, I see like a giant canvas. So why am I making these tiny pieces? But I went with a medium format because I was like, I need to get into the space. Like, I need to be almost face to face with this without going overboard. Like, I think that you could still tell the story in a smaller format. Yeah, and I just think that those rules don't really apply to me, and they couldn't. So I'm not interested in academia. I don't think that there's any basis for judging the work. And I think that Black artists, specifically, and Indigenous artists, should be able to create whatever. It doesn't even have to be political or seen as political, because it's not our job. That's not our job. We're still artists. We can still make whatever we want. And white artists can do anything and staple a banana to a wall, and, you know, it's still seen as something very deep. Whereas we are expected to create something that always speaks from this place of like trauma and history. And I guess that's what I'm doing, but I feel like I'm doing this because I want to, not because I feel the pressure to be like the voice of a people, or whatever that means.
Yeah, it's on your own terms, right? Like,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
not,
it's on my own terms, and it's through conversation, and it's collaborative, because I get to actually speak to the people that I'm making portraits of. And instead of using them as a muse, or, you know, just delighting in only the image of them, I want to see like a whole person, and have, well, while I'm painting, I'm thinking about what we talked about. And I'm thinking about all the little moments that maybe my brain caught, but I didn't realize until now that I'm painting this thing, and like little tattoos where I was like, why didn't I ask about that? And I just was able to keep the conversation going even when they weren't in the room, because I was staring at them for hours at a time. What was the question again?
Oh, I was just wondering if you could talk more about your perspective around being a self-taught artist, and like what kind of creative opportunities that opens up for you in your artistic life. But I feel like you've kind of already, I think that was a really good answer.
I think it's really freeing if you're self-taught, or if you're not seeking legitimacy, because then you really have like the opportunity to make anything without fearing judgment. And so I feel free.
Yeah. No, I like that you I think, you know, you mentioning that you're a self-taught artist, I think that kind of to like that transpires to me when I look at your work, because I'm like, oh, this is like, this comes from you. Like, I don't see any kind of, like, you're not trying to appeal to a certain specific canon, or like something that was taught in like a university or an art degree or something. Like, I'm feeling very much like this is a path that you followed like on your own, right? Like, anyway. Maybe I'm
I
not
think
making
it's
sense,
also
but
that I'm able to experiment a lot more freely because I'm not trying to establish a style or a specific look that will always be tied back to me. Because I think that if you do want to become a legitimate artist, you have to say, my work is recognizable because of this. And I'm still in a state of experimenting, so I don't really care if people can't recognize it as my work, just as they recognize that it is work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm saying that like I was really nervous to start collage, but when I was growing up, my sister used to make so many collages. We used to get all these magazines and she would just cut it up. She had Pinterest. She introduced me to Pinterest. She introduced me to all this like Tumblr editing software. So all of my beginning as an artist comes from that, like wanting to just cut things out and paste them and look at them in a different way. So in a way, I feel like this project kind of brought me back to that. And I was able to just play around with, what do I want to collage here? And maybe I'll just paint over that. I don't like that. And yeah, that playfulness is kind of what I'm seeking instead of legitimacy. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then maybe like the last question before we open up, because I feel like maybe some people might have questions for you. I just have one last question. I'm just curious to know if there's any other projects that you'd like to share, or if, because you're quite involved, as I mentioned before, you're quite involved in the community. You've done murals, and so I'm just curious to see what's next for you.
Yeah, so I'm actually working on an art show coming up in Sudbury, and I will be showing these pieces along with other pieces that kind of express my own experience with queerness growing up. And I'm still working with the collective with Rana, Isaac. We've done a few projects together now and we work well as a team. Rana is now doing her PhD in Montreal, so we're able to meet up a little bit more and talk about new projects. But yeah, I think we'll be moving forward as a collective and creating new pieces. We just started dabbling in like Afrofuturism and trying to imagine a future where there are Black people, because we're all kind of nerds. So we were wondering why Wi-Fi doesn't really, sci-fi doesn't really represent an idea of Black futures, or they can't imagine us in the future. And a lot of people are moving towards that. So we're learning from people like Janelle Monáe and how are they just expressing themselves and creating a Black future in their head, and playing around with that idea of utopia where we actually do exist in the future and we actually are included, but also able to explore sustainability and go back to those roots of like our people that were able to live off the land and learn from the land. How do we return into that in the context of sci-fi? So that's kind of the projects that we're working on right now. Yeah, and I'm hoping to just explore more like sexuality. Like I feel that I don't share any of that stuff that has to do with my own body or my own sexuality. So I'll be open to taking it a step further and sharing those kind of pieces. So that's what's coming up. I'm also working on a project right now in Montreal where it's kind of like this, where we're looking at either historical activists or present day activists who are not activists, but queer icons. And we will be like creating a little book. All of us are from different countries that aren't Canadian, and we'll be creating a little book of just like queer icons from our countries. So that's really interesting. I'll be doing 3 portraits for that as well.
That's super nice. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. At this point, I think if anyone has questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can turn on your camera, open up your mic. If you're watching this on the live stream on Facebook, you can type it in, you can type a question in the chat and those questions will come to me eventually.
I think you're muted, Danielle.
Oh. Danielle, I think you're muted still.
Anyways, I was just saying you covered so much, Sonia. It was really nice. You're so generous with all of your ideas and sharing them and your experiences and all that. Yeah, and I think Sabrina has a question there. Maybe we'll let her talk.
Hey, first of all, excellent work and congratulations.
Thank you.
So happy to see you. Might be a little bit out there, but since you've got the architecture background, and I know as someone who's moved around, you've got a strange sense of place and belonging. And since this project has been fairly introspective as well as introspective, has it changed what your sense of home is and what your sense of place feels like and what spaces can become?
I feel like that's a really good question because you know how I am. But I have this issue where me and Sabrina have talked about it before, where I don't understand what people are feeling when they say that they miss home. I'm like, what are you referring to? Because it's not a place, obviously. So in architecture, one of the challenges I have is that I don't really connect with any reference point for myself for home. So this project actually made me realize through the 3 interviews that we are kind of creating smaller ideas of home, like community and the home as a body, or the body as a home, where when I was talking to Gaia, it's that feeling where you're saying that like, am I really trapped in this body, or is the outer environment not suited for me? So I realized that I decided my home is my body, and everything I do is according to my scale. All the architecture I will design is according to this smaller scale because I feel that that will have more impact. And I just don't think that it has to be one thing or the other. I think it's a very abstract concept for anyone. So yeah, I think I'm accepting the body as a home and community as a home, or community building as a home.
With the idea of the body being the home, it's so grounding. It's that's where it all starts. Wherever you live after is like secondary.
Yeah, and that's the amazing part too, is because then you're finding out, like, well, I'm finding out about my own culture, which I wasn't really introduced to very deeply, but finding out that I have to create a world within myself. Like, I will get the tattoos I want, I will wear the clothes that really, really feel like me, separate from the outer view of who I am. And I think that's what a lot of queer people are doing and recognizing in others, is that you're expressing something that is kind of out of line. Like, the way you're dressing isn't completely acceptable. And knowing that I can step out of my physical home and still be in something that I created myself and that makes me feel held is very important to me now.
Beautiful.
I think there's
Y a-t-il d'autres questions?
J'ai pas de questions, si vous, mais j'ai juste un commentaire, si je peux me le permettre. I'm loving. I just love your process, our processes, and just the honesty and the la générosité, the generosity that you're sharing with us, and that in itself is quite inspiring. And I simply wanted to say, yeah, thank you. It is truly inspiring in a time where we're looking for inspiration. You know, it's a context and it's a challenging one. And yeah, thank you for this very generous sharing experience.
Thank you.
it was really nice to hear you, Sonia, and to hear about your 2 months experience. And I'm so glad that we were able to do this with you. And
Thank you so much.
no, thank you. Thank you. And I love the way your project evolved also, because at some point it was something, and then and the fact that it went back to portraits is beautiful. I think it's a very intimate way of working, and it covers everything. Like we can feel that you had interaction with these people that you portrayed. And merci, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Laura, for your patience with me.
You don't have to thank me. Honestly, I was just like, I just want to help you realize what you want to realize. And
Yeah, and it helped a lot. Thanks.
I have something to add.
Oh, hi. Hello,
Hi.
Sandra. That's my sister.
I'm the collaging
The
sister.
collage sister.
I just want to say that I'm so proud of the work that you've done, and that you give yourself permission to evolve, because I remember we talked about the project in the earlier stages, and you talked about a lot of your fears and your concerns around the kind of art that you were making. However, you do this thing where you allow yourself to express those concerns, and then you kind of free yourself from them. So like once they're out there, you just end up doing what it is that you want to do. And I'm so proud and so inspired by the fact that you continue to amaze me. And you said I inspired you, but truly just hearing that, you know, in this moment in time, and feeling like I'm not being my creative and true self, and you're always encouraging me to be that. And so I really appreciate seeing the final work. It's super inspiring, especially knowing like how we grew up not being able to
you know
express
everything. You know exactly.
exactly, not being able to express the kinds of people that we really truly felt that we were, and almost like escaping in the collaging that we did. And I would escape online and Tumblr, and you would escape in your art. And it's so beautiful to see how these aspects of us have become almost a huge part of our final selves. And when you talk about not really feeling like you have that experience of home, my body is also my home. And that's why what I wear is so important to me, because when I step outside, I feel like I still have that part of me. And that's why I'm so inspired to do that, because you kind of give yourself permission to do that, and seeing you do that then reflects on me and allows me the permission to do the creative things that I want to do. So really amazing, and honestly just so proud. Thank you.
Thanks. I love you.
I love you.
Hey, Thomas.
Hey,
Hey.
Thomas.
Hey, sorry, I was driving and I just pulled over, but I wanted to just say congrats, Sonia. It's beautiful, and to just you know, the thing that really stands out for me, and you know, that I've known you for a while now, is this the effort at intimacy, and that, you know, I think for you it's become a means of survival, you know, to develop the relationships you have, and to survive given the circumstances that you've been living through, and some of the struggles that you've faced. And I think that it's wonderful that that's, you know, become an expression of your art, and that it's something we don't think about a lot, that, you know, intimacy is a way that we survive and we get through things. And it's really beautiful to see you starting to, or you showing us that the power of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Lumod!
Great work, great talk. You're amazing. And I just wanted to go back to one detail you said of like saying when my art is not that it's not distinct, but you're saying like I don't want to make a mark that is recognizable.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. But to me, when I see your process and your artwork on your Instagram page, I'm always like, this I know it's Sonia's, not because it's on your page, but like I'm always impressed by the light and the details that go into your work. So I'm already like, okay, I know what's her style, and
Yeah.
I really admire your artwork and your talent. That is all.
Yeah. Thank you, Maud.
Yeah, thanks for this, the GNO.